when I prepared for the interview with you, I discovered that you are a psychotherapist specializing in clinical hypnosis.
Yes.
And you were trained in advanced clinical hypnosis, I think, at the Academy of Professional Hypnosis in 1997. And now that's pretty fascinating because I always wanted to talk to a hypnotist.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so I got a little bit of a heads up on the brainwashing stuff, so I'm pretty good at recognizing it.
Yes. Can anyone learn to hypnotize
Yeah,
people?
yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah.
do you need to have some special talent to do that?
So I should clarify that I'm a psychotherapist opposed to psychopathic authoritarianism. So I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a psychotherapist, but I do specialize in clinical hypnosis. Yeah, everybody can be hypnotized that wants to be hypnotized. It's actually the opposite of what people think. The smarter you are, the better a subject you are. I mean, as long as you have average intelligence or above, you're a good subject. But I get people with 160 IQs or plus that, and they drop like flies. It's hysterical. Now you have to be a willing participant because it's a collaboration. Now, if you're sitting here saying, "Nah, you can't hypnotize me," that it's a collaboration. But yeah, the only people who have a problem be someone like Forrest Gump level of intelligence, just because they can't focus and follow instruction.
So that's interesting what you said. I mean, sorry, I just wanted to stay on this for a minute.
That's why you saw, Camelia, that's why you saw so many really smart people getting brainwashed during COVID and everything, because you can be very smart. The power of suggestion works all the time. Like I remember finding a study with fibromyalgia patients and giving them suggestions while they're awake makes changes to their brain, but when they're in hypnotic trance state, it's just much more amplified. So if you're somebody who's steeped in academia or steeped in medicine, and these are your authorities that you because everybody relies on authority, and it's really easy to brainwash you, because if someone you trust is giving you information, you're not going to be as critical with challenging it. And that's how a lot of these really smart people got brainwashed. And remember too, when you're dealing with academics and scientists, they're almost like somebody who puts too much value on their appearance, except they're doing it with their intelligence. And so they're very vulnerable to manipulation because of that, because their whole value is in their intelligence and how many little awards they can get about how smart they are. And so it just makes them a little easier to manipulate, I think.
Oh, that's an interesting explanation. So it doesn't have anything. So what you're saying is it doesn't have anything per se to do with the high level of intelligence they have, but with the whole baggage that comes with having that intelligence and being hooked up
both in a way, both. But I mean, again, the smarter you are, the better hypnotic subject you are, because you can focus better and you can follow directions more easily.
That is really fascinating. Wow. Okay. So what about people who don't want to be hypnotized?
Well, in a clinical setting, you wouldn't be hypnotized. I mean,
Right.
We do have a saying in therapy that you can't fix stupid, but I mean, if you're going to come to me, pay me, and not want to be hypnotized, I can't fix that, but I'll take your money, right? But it's a collaborative process. It's a collaborative process. But people need to understand, people have had surgeries in hypnosis. Like people's legs have been amputated in a deep hypnotic trance. Before.
No kidding.
Oh yeah, James Esdale, before we had chemical anesthesia, he was a surgeon from the UK practicing in India. He did eye surgeries, abdominal surgeries, leg amputations with people in a hypnotic trance. In fact, he was self-taught on a book on mesmerism, so he actually had nonverbal inductions. He was doing mesmeric passes. And then it got a little more scientific with James Braid in like 1850, also from the UK, and a surgeon, and he coined the phrase hypnotism. So it became a little more scientific, but it always kind of wax and wanes because it's easier to give someone a pill than it is, using hypnosis. But it's very effective on a wide range of issues. But when you're coming to the people being kind of brainwashed, this is relevant, because say if you came to me, I don't know, let's say you want to work on anxiety or sleep or something like that, and I can give you direct suggestions. Like a direct suggestion, I'm just going to give a silly example. When the doorbell rings, you're going to scratch your nose. Okay, that's a direct suggestion, right? So I give you direct suggestions. I can also give you what are called indirect suggestions. And some of those are verbal and less direct, literally like more open-ended, but some of them are built into metaphors that you're using. And the idea behind that is you'll have less conscious resistance. So if you don't realize you're being bombarded, you just trust what you're hearing and you're not awake to what's going on. And you trust certain authorities if you're in academia and medicine, whatever, even just the average person, you're working your work week and you listen to a little bit of news here and there. You're not going to question the fact that you're getting these suggestions. So it's like indirect. So for instance, one of the reasons why I realized very early on, um, that okay, so I knew that the COVID injections, the mRNA injections were a weapon of mass destruction before they came out. Just because I was awake to 9/11 being inside job, false flag. So I was awake to this stuff. But I should point out that even Dr. Francis Boyle, the law professor who wrote the 89 Bioweapons and Anti-Terrorism Act, did say that the vaccines, quote unquote vaccines, were a bioweapon before they came out in 2020. So there were some very serious people saying that, and he said that because the COVID itself was, a gain of function, synthetic bioweapon, and so as a result, because COVID was in the injections, that also made the vaccine a bioweapon. There were other reasons he said it too, but that was one of the main ones because one was a derivative of the other. But a lot of people did not wake up to that, and I think some of this has to do with past experience. But one of the reasons I did realize early on that like fighting mandates is a losing proposition, and I really think mandates is a psychological operation because when you're dealing with the mRNA injections and COVID injections, because debating whether you're going to mandate a biological weapon, there's an indirect Ericksonian hypnotic command in there that it's okay to give people bioweapons. You can't win by arguing mandate. So you have to go right it's like taking a stake and going right into the vampire's heart. These are weapons of mass destruction. That's why early on, like I started working on it in May of 2021, but by February 2023, I got my first ban to jab resolution passed at my county Republican Party, which declared the injections to be biological and technological weapons of mass destruction, called on the governor and attorney general to act. I got that passed in like 10 counties, 10 county parties in Florida and in counties in different states. And then eventually, like the Idaho and the Arizona Republican parties passed that resolution. Kind of hit a brick wall there. I think it was good because it shifted things a little bit, although there's a lot of censorship about it. Most people don't know about it. But like I think it helped here in Florida because Surgeon General Latipo in January of 24 did come out and call for a halt to the injections. And the Florida Department of Health did say that they're not safe for human use and that they're a potential threat to the human genome. Translation, a potential threat to our species. So it was good in that way. But Governor DeSantis here just is afraid to do anything. He knows they're a weapon. He's just either a coward or corrupt. So what I did is I filed my first case in March of 23. It was a writ of mandamus, and mandamus case law is kind of niche. And what happened is that the court said that it was an improper use of a mandamus because you can only use it for a ministerial duty. And what that means is, like, say if the governor has to appoint somebody in 60 days and they don't do it, something real specific like that. But I did find case law to show that you can use the mandamus if there's an abuse of that discretionary duty, which is what I was arguing. But I lost my appeal on that in October of 24. So then in
Can I just ask you a question,
yeah.
Joe? Mandamus, a Mandamus case, what exactly is that?
So a writ of mandamus, literally, it's trying to compel. Literally, the word mandamus or mandamus, I've heard it pronounced both ways, but it's Latin for we command. So you're literally trying to compel the governor and the attorney general in this case to take a specific action. And so, but the case law is very kind of narrow on that. And so, but people need to understand that the attorney for the governor and the attorney general of the state of Florida argued to keep the mRNA injections on the market. A lot of people are not aware of that in my case, and that's public record. So anyway, I lost that appeal in October. I filed a new case on December 1st of 2024, and this case is currently in the appellate court. And in this case, I just did a regular complaint seeking an injunction to prohibit the governor and attorney general of Florida to allow the continued distribution of these weapons of mass destruction, as well as declaratory judgments on Florida Statute 790.166, which is our weapons of mass destruction law, as well as our fraud and our informed consent laws. So
Right,
it was,
and I think you do have Ladapo on board there because when we talk about his recent comments, he also said that eventually he wants the mRNA injections to be banned completely, to be forbidden
yes, and
off the
he, like I
market.
said, he called for a halt to them last year in January
Yeah.
2024. So, and the Florida Department of Health has said they're not safe for humans and a potential
Mhm.
threat
Mhm.
human genome. So what happened is I filed my case, and I have 120 days to serve my summons on the defendants, but the court dismissed my case 6 business days later on December 9th. I was in the process of collecting affidavits. I had like 9 affidavits filed in my case. One from Dr. Francis Boyle, who's a law professor who wrote the bioweapons law, medical doctors, and so on. And so experts. And the case got dismissed, and I filed a motion for rehearing. When I filed my motion for rehearing, I brought in the Florida Civil Rights Act into my argument because you have to preserve your arguments. And then, of course, that was denied as well. And the court actually indirectly threatened me with sanctions for if I continue to file frivolous cases. Now, keep in mind, I have an affidavit from the law board's leading legal authority in my case. So, in my case, I'm arguing that I was injured. I was injured. Not, I didn't get the injection, but I was injured from the shedding. Back up in 2023, in April 2023, when I was doing all these banded jab resolutions, I woke up on April 1st in congestive heart failure at like 3:30 in the morning. I couldn't breathe. So on April 10th, I had triple bypass heart surgery. In fact, while I was in the hospital there, I got Dr. Francis Boyle to endorse my banded jab resolution, and even got him on a podcast like the day I was getting operated on, because I figured it'd be a good parting shot if I died. So I filed an appeal, and I have 8 issues in my appeal that I filed here. Um, One of them, though, what happened is on February 18th, the attorney for the governor and the attorney general of the state of Florida filed a notice that they will not be filing an answer brief to my appellate brief. And the reason they said, is because I never served them the summons with my complaint. I think they may have thought this was my mistake. I'm not sure. It wasn't. I have 120 days to issue that summons. The court dismissed the case before I got the summons from the clerk of the court. Clear procedural error on their part. They violated the rules. And so the next day, on February 19th, the First District Court of Appeal, where I'm actually appealing at it here in Florida, in another case, part of their decision basically says you can't dismiss a case prior to notice being served. So on that one procedural issue alone, for me to lose my appeal, in my view, the First District Court of Appeal would have to go against their own decision from February. So
Mhm.
I amended my appellate brief to include that issue because I hadn't had it originally, and I filed a supplemental authority with that case in my case. So my motion for oral argument was denied at the end of May. Now, in my initial Mandamus case last year, it took about 2 weeks after that to dismiss my case. It's been about 4 months right now, and they haven't given a ruling yet. Which, the longer it takes, I think, the better, because they might actually be reading it and writing a decision. In Florida, they can do what's called per curiam affirmed. It means they're affirming the lower court's decision without writing an opinion. If they do that, it pretty much blocks you from appealing it to the state Supreme Court. And so it's kind of not really fair, but I think it would be harder to do in my case right now. But so I want to just briefly mention a couple things about my case here. So the errors that I'm saying is, one, the procedural error that I just told you about, but the lower court said that I never stated a cause of action and that my petition was like vague and overly general. That's not true. My petition was very specific and meticulous. I got 100 sources in there, a bunch of studies and everything. It's long. It's 80 pages with another 50 some odd pages of affidavits. But I do state my cause of action, and I also it's the court said that I didn't meet the criteria for an injunction or a declaratory relief, which I clearly do. And keep in mind, I'm actually having statements from the Florida Department of Health in my brief and things like that. And so, and the court also claims that I can't force a prosecution. At no point am I asking for a prosecution in my case. What I'm arguing is, so I was injured from the shedding of the transmission of the technology. 'Cause I have a small therapy office. I'm here, with a couple, hours with someone, and I am arguing that's what caused my triple bypass heart surgery. But what I'm arguing also is that even if the court doesn't believe me, it doesn't matter because uh, under the Florida Civil Rights Act, I have a right to public accommodation with a reasonable degree of safety, and I can show the shedding is real, and so I brought the Florida Civil Rights into it. So I'm arguing that as well as just basic constitutional rights. In the Declaration of Independence, all that stuff that's in there is actually in the Florida Constitution. It's not like a preamble; it's in our basic rights here. So you have a right to your life and your liberty and your property, that kind of thing. So you don't have a right to just kill us or interests like that. So I'm arguing both constitutional rights. So I think that's important because I can show the shedding is real.
Yeah, and I have a question there. So that's your case is a really interesting case. And so your argument is that the shedding caused you heart problems and your heart failure that resulted in the triple
Yes.
bypass operation, right? So, but how? So the question then is, how can you prove that the shedding caused your heart
I don't
failure?
have to because I'm arguing that according to the Florida Civil Rights Act, I should have public accommodation with a reasonable degree of safety. I now have a heart condition, and so it's a danger. The shedding is a danger, an enhanced danger to me because of that heart condition, or anybody else that has a pre-existing condition. And that's why I was saying in my motion for rehearing, I introduced the Florida Civil Rights Act for that specific reason. Because at this point, there's no quantitative spike protein test where you could show even who's vaccinated and who's not. So now let me just go over a couple more quick things on my case because I filed some supplemental authorities. One was Dr. Latipo's study showing the Pfizer shots were more dangerous. The other was the Japanese press conference they did showing an excess of 610,000 deaths. Now, if you translate that into the United States, you're looking at about a 41 underreporting factor on our VAERS data. So you had like 38,000 people that died. So that would be 1,558,000 people died shortly after getting shots. Now, but I want people to
Yeah.
understand that's not talking about the people getting sick and dying now. Those are the people that died shortly after getting shots. Nobody's connecting the dots at all of the people getting cancer, heart attacks, and so on. A year, 2, 3 years later, that kind of thing. I mean, I know Edward Dowd
Yes.
says there's about 5,000 excess deaths a week, so that's an extra 250,000 a year, and that's going to go up over time. But so I filed supplemental authorities. I also filed Secretary Kennedy's statement at Health and Human Services, speaking in his official capacity, that the mRNA injections are not effective against the flu or COVID, and the risks outweigh the benefits because he did not take them off the market. That shows criminal intent on behalf of Kennedy and the United States Department of Health and Human Services from that moment forward is what I'm arguing because it meets what's called the knowingness standard of intent. And that's what I'm arguing there. In my original brief, I point out like the Kansas versus Pfizer case where they say that Health and Human Services, Stanford and Pfizer knew about the dangers in December of 2020, yet they still went forward with it. You and I know everybody knew about it before then
Yes, of
because
course.
it's
Right.
premeditated. But from your typical deep state bureaucrat level, they knew about it at that point. So in my case, I argue that look, the shots are causing harm, disease, disability, and death. They lied. They're not effective. In fact, there's a negative effectiveness. You're more likely to get sick if you get the shots. Then I talk a little bit about the nanotechnology, spike proteins, and so on. And I argue that they knew these were harmful, yet kept saying it was safe and effective. So again, that's the knowingness standard. But that's me arguing in my case. But here's Kennedy coming out and basically admitting it, the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and so they're clearly admitting intent at this. And the reason that's important is because if you look at the bioweapons or weapons of mass destruction laws in Florida or even the federal law, intent is kind of wrapped into the definitions. And so that
Yes, it's
shows
crucial, in
that.
fact.
And from
Yes.
that moment forward, I think that clearly shows intent. I also filed as a supplemental authority a paper called COVID-19 Injections, Harms and Damages, a Non-Exhaustive Conclusion. And that was by Dr. Andrew Zivjets, was the lead author, but 11 prominent authors on there, Dr. Vila, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Merrick, Nick Holscher. You have Dr. Mavrakakis, Dr. James Thorpe. So some of these people are very highly published. So you got 11 prominent authors in this paper, and it was published in the American Journal of Physicians and Surgeons. And this paper clearly states that the virus and the vaccine violated the Biological Weapons Convention. Okay, so this is a peer-reviewed scientific journal article. So I filed that as a supplemental authority. These are designed to influence the court because everything in my case, you'll view it as frivolous if you totally discard the fact that these are weapons. If you accept the possibility that these are weapons, and nothing in my initial case is frivolous. And one other thing I filed, which is really important, is I think I filed this on September 5th. Dr. Latipo had come out and had a big conference, speaking in his official capacity as Surgeon General here in Florida, with the governor standing nearby, where he spoke about ending all vaccine mandates in Florida. Now, this is good because they're not just talking about the COVID shot; they're talking about all vaccine mandates. And Dr. Latipo's on the record for saying they need to stop the mRNA injections. So if your kid's going to school, they can't force them to do it. Now, Surgeon General Latipo pulled a lot of the rules out of the Department of Health, so some of those mandates were taken away, but they're going to need legislation to get them all removed. So it's not like a done deal. Okay, but what Surgeon General Latipo said in this press event, whatever it was, in his official capacity, was during his speech, he says that the mRNA injections are a poison. So I
Yes.
took that transcript, filed that along with the video, filed that in my case as a supplemental authority because this is the Surgeon General of the state of Florida speaking. He's not on Tucker Carlson. He's speaking in his official capacity here, saying that these are a poison. If you look at Florida statute 790.166, he uses the term poisonous when, so this is the legal definition of a weapon of mass destruction when describing biological products or chemical agents. So that is a legally significant thing that I filed there. Again, I can't say what the court should do or what they're going to do. I know what I think they should do. So I'm hoping at a minimum, this stuff will influence them to reverse and remand the case because they can do it on that procedural issue of dismissing the case. Like I said, I really want them to issue the injunction, but that's less likely to happen at the appellate court. It can happen, but if they reverse and remand it, it means the case is going to move forward at least. But I would like them to do the injunction too at this point because the evidence is
Right.
overwhelming. So
You know,
that's where we're up at with my case right now. I'm waiting for a decision.
the statement that Ladapo made recently about the mRNA shots being poison, that is, I think, a very significant statement that should definitely help your case. Because if you are aware as an official, as a government official, or as a doctor, that something you are injecting into someone's bloodstream is poison, then you cannot possibly give that substance into anybody's. You cannot administer it to anyone.
Right.
Um, so
And
uh,
and it's the legal definition in the law that I'm litigating on.
yes, exactly, because you are causing, because you know it's poison and you are administering it to someone. So there is even if you don't want to hurt someone, if let's say as a doctor, let's say you're aware it's poison, you don't want to kill your patients, but you're still going along with even if the person asks you to be injected with something that is poisonous, you are not allowed. It's criminal for a doctor to
Right.
inject someone with
Right. And
something
it's
that's
in the legal
poisonous.
definition. It is the legal definition. Like I should send him a
Yes,
Christmas card for that one. But it's so clear in my view. I think that it's legally significant. I think that's a hard one to ignore because again, he was speaking in his official capacity. The governor,
exactly.
who's an attorney, who's an appellee slash defendant in this case, is like standing nearby when he said it. So they don't even have
Yes.
plausible deniability.
Okay, so let's have a closer look at what Ladapo actually said, his
Okay.
comments about the mRNA shots and the technology, because he said he wants to remove the mRNA shots in Florida. He wants to eventually ban them completely. And he also suggested that the entire mRNA technology is unsafe and dangerous. That's a very, very stark comment if you compare that to all the let's say the other 49 states in the
Mhm.
United States, Florida and with its Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo and DeSantis, it's the only state that is
Well,
going
remember,
that
DeSantis
far.
is fighting to keep the mRNA injections on the market.
But he said recently that he wants to eventually ban them.
Yet I'm suing
So,
him and he's not taking them off the market.
yeah, well, he hasn't done that yet, but
No,
he
so
would
he's
like.
afraid. He's either corrupt or a coward. He knows in my opinion, DeSantis has to know they're a weapon at this point. He can't
Yeah, he probably does. I
he's seen my
agree. He
briefs,
probably
and I'm
does.
not gonna and I think it's really important that people not give him a pass because he's doing all this stuff with the mandates and stuff so he can run for president. Just like RFK Jr., who's running a limited hangout of Health and Human Services, is planning on running for president. So they're doing as little as possible, making it looking like they're doing something, but they're actually not doing anything so that they can run for office. So people shouldn't be cheering anybody here because nobody's actually doing their job. This is very clear. These are weapons. You need to immediately stop. You can't be America first and look the other way while they're murdering American citizens. And so people watching right now or listening right now need to really get to what I'm saying right now. Most people that you know will die from these injections. They will have a shortened lifespan from these injections. One study came out showing a 37% reduction in lifespans. Now, these injections cause neurological problems, heart problems, cancers, and so on. They're associated with increased infant mortality, fertility problems, with birth rates. I mean, in the Philippines, their infant mortality went as far back as it was 20 years ago on how much it's went up. So you're shortening lifespans, you're reducing birth rates, and so you don't need to be a scientist or even a medical doctor to recognize if you're giving a bunch of people chronic diseases and illnesses, they're not going to live as long. So if you're a 35-year-old man or woman and you got this injection and you only live to be 63 instead of 80, they just stole 17 years of your life. That's murder. And
Right.
a kid, and it's so like a child getting a shot. If that study's accurate, they're only going to live to be 50.
So in a recent interview, that was just a few days ago, I think, Ladapo talked to Dr. Mary Telly Bowden
Mm-hmm.
on her podcast. And there he made this statement here. He said, the goal with the mRNA is for that not to be available to anyone because no one should be using that one, which is in line with his pronouncement that
Mm-hmm.
it's poisonous. It's really harmful. So, and he also insisted that the technology is unsafe in his view. Yeah, makes sense. So that is his goal.
The
I mean,
challenge, here's the
that
challenge.
is,
Here's
yeah.
the challenge, though, Camellia. Dr. Ladapo does not have the power to stop the shots. The people that have the power to
Mhm.
stop the shots are Governor DeSantis and all the other 49 governors. They have the power using their state weapons of mass destruction, bioweapons laws, or even terrorism laws to stop this. President Trump has the power to stop this with an executive order.
Right.
Secretary Kennedy at Health and Human Services, he's got the power to pull these shots simply because they're unsafe. He doesn't even have to go to bioweapon route. And Attorney General Pam Bondi, under 18 USC 175 Chapter 10, she could seek an injunction to stop the injections. See, the thing is that none of these people, I mean, Ladapo is pushing, I believe Surgeon General Ladapo is pushing this as far as he can in his position. Because the only thing he could do, and I've pushed for it, but it's not going to happen, is he could declare a public emergency and pull the shots. But DeSantis would probably fire him like 10 minutes later. So
Mhm.
he can only push it so far. But you have to recognize that, prosecutors, law enforcement, they're not doing their job. Any county sheriff, or like say if you're in Texas, if you're a district attorney for a county, you get together with the county sheriff, you could stop these shots. You could literally change the course of human history. But that would require a little courage. These people are afraid.
Yes. Yeah, so I agree that he goes as far. I mean, he's a careful man, and he does it like step by step. But clearly, he's aware of the dangers. Also, by the way, RFK, he could just declare as HHS secretary, he could declare an end to the PrEP Act, and then nobody would dare to administer these shots anymore
But
because
he
they lose
could
their
pull the
liability shield.
shots. He could pull the shots because they're unsafe. He has that power. He doesn't have to go to bioweapon route. He doesn't have to meet that threshold.
So when Ladapo says that they should not be available to anyone, you would think, okay, if that's the case, then if that's really what he thinks, then they shouldn't be available to anyone, right? Why would you make them available? He says they shouldn't be available, but they are available. So do you think that this is an indication that over the next months or so, the state of Florida or DeSantis will actually pull these shots off the market in Florida?
Not unless there's more pressure. See, I believe in maximum think about it. I'm suing. I got a bill. I
Mm.
believe in maximum pressure because they're not going to do any more than they have to do. So the goal here right now between Kennedy and DeSantis is to do as little as possible to make it look like they're doing something so they can run for president against J.D. Vance. That's what's going on right now. Kennedy's running a limited hangout, textbook limited hangout. What did he do? He admitted the problem. The shots don't work. The risks outweigh the benefits. Then he turns around and says, we need to have placebo controlled double blind studies. Come on. Kennedy knows that these are a bioweapon. Someone should introduce him to that guy that wrote that book, The Real Anthony Fauci. So that's a textbook limited hangout. I'm sorry.
Yes.
And Governor DeSantis, I get it. You know, it takes a little courage, but come on. If I were governor of the state of Florida, I would have the constitutional crisis with the federal government and say, you're not going to murder our people anymore. Again, most people we know are going to die from the complications of these injections in the next decade or two ahead of us. That's a fact. And I'm not saying that to scare people. I have type 1 diabetes. On average, the lifespan is 15 years less than everybody else. Camellia, you throw in my heart thing, the whole triple bypass, I'll make it through the interview maybe. But, the point is that if you had
I
identical,
hope so.
let's say you have identical twins. If you give one of them asthma, they're not going to live as long as the one without the asthma. And asthma is a pretty benign disease because as diseases go, there's a lot worse diseases you can have. So, it's very unfortunate. Again, I think a lot of folks doing the right thing. I think he's pushing as far as he can, but the decision maker is Governor DeSantis. He and the Attorney General of the state of Florida have to enforce the law, and they're not. Now, one thing I should say about my case very briefly is what I'm arguing. They could argue that there's no civil cause of action in the criminal statute that I'm citing. They could make that argument. But I'm arguing that the weapons of mass destruction law is also a public health law. So I'm arguing that just as if there's an environmental spill, you wouldn't let them continue to pollute our water. You would do the injunction and that kind of thing. So, but if they give me a written, as long as I get a written opinion, I could at least appeal it to the state Supreme Court of the state if I lost. I'm hoping I win, but yeah. So I mean, I hate to sound so cynical on these people, but there have been activists like myself that have been doing way more than we should be doing because we're not getting paid to do it. These people, your county sheriff is on salary, the prosecutors are on salary, the governor's on salary, and so on. The president, these people are all making tons of money, and they're either complicit or looking the other way, which makes them complicit in biological warfare against the American people. And once you realize that this is a bioweapon, that means we are at war, and they're all on the wrong side.
Yeah. So, with coming back to Ladapo,
Yes,
I give him the benefit of the doubt, and I think you're right when you say he's pushing it as far
I
as he
agree.
can at a given moment. And I also think that he and DeSantis have a good relationship, and that DeSantis is actually on board and agrees with him, and they are trying to. Well, I hope
Then
so.
I have to
And
disagree
trying
on
to
that.
figure out how they can do this. You don't
Well,
think so? Okay,
no,
but
well, here's why. I'm suing him
yeah.
for over a year and a half, and he has the evidence. All he has to do is say, hey, look, we were presented with this evidence. We're going to halt these for now and have further investigation. Oh, that's all he's got to do. I mean, instead, he had his attorneys argue to keep the shots on the market. In my last case, in
Hmm.
this current case, they're not filing any answer brief, which, by the way, is risky because according to the rules, the court can take everything I've pleaded as fact. So that's a little risky for them to do.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Like, in other words, I
Yeah.
file
Right.
something, there's
Right.
nobody there to contest it.
Now, with Ladapo also talked about removing all the mandates, all the vaccination
Mhm.
mandates in Florida, which is a great idea.
Yeah.
And he, when he was asked, I think, yeah, Dr. Bowden asked him about the reaction in the state of Florida. And Ladapo, I mean, he is not someone who is prone to very dramatic statements, but his response was really instructive because even he said that the reaction was very intense. It was intense. And what he meant was he was probably being attacked from all sides. Um, he didn't really make clear from whom, but I suspect it
People on
was,
both parties,
yeah,
because
it was, it was
they're getting money
yes,
from the
exactly.
pharmaceutical industry,
Yeah.
and
And
so
then,
they
of
don't
course, the
want
media as well, because they're also getting, they are
70% of
being
the revenue
paid.
comes from pharma.
Exactly, exactly. I don't know how many parents actually attacked them. I would be amazed if that had been a considerable number of parents. I'm not really sure
Here's the difficulty there, because even though you're going after mandates, getting rid of all the mandates
yeah.
and everything, and believe me, they all want to focus on mandates because it's an easier argument. It's a choice argument, this and that. Nobody wants to address the elephant in a room that your family members getting their cancer and dying because they were hit with a weapon of mass destruction. They're all afraid to go there, but that's the truth, and that's where we have to go. If he were
Mm.
arguing that this was a bioweapon, it'd be a lot different because people would be, they might have an initial reaction to it, but then they're going to turn around and be like, oh shit, did I just get hit with this? Like, what did they really give me? And I think that's where it needs to go. It's it's they, because they can do the fear thing about, oh, you're not going to have mandates, somebody's going to get sick of this, which is a silly argument, because if you believe the quote unquote vaccine works, you're protected when you get it. Don't worry about anybody else. But so, and Ron Paul talked about that decades ago. That's a silly argument about mandating vaccines. But I think that's the challenge, because they're trying to go after the low hanging fruit of the mandates when, if you went after the bioweapon and you literally stopped it, there'd be a ripple effect, which would affect all that, all the mandate. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
But of
he is
course,
getting hit from all sides. I totally agree on that.
yeah. But
Within the
of course,
parties, the establishment of each side is going after him.
yes, definitely. Let's go to your Bioweapons Prohibition Act that you wrote a bill, you wrote a legislative proposal, and then you found someone in Minnesota, I believe, right, to
Yes.
take this on and introduce it to the Minnesota legislature.
Yeah. So actually, Dr. Andrew Zivietz, who's the lead author on that paper saying that the virus and vaccine violated the biological weapons connection, he connected me with Representative Shane Meckland in Minnesota, who he introduced. He was What happened was he just introduced another bill, like, to get rid of the injections. And what was happening is like 7 states came up with legislation to get rid of the mRNA injections, and it was quite frankly, I was getting angry by it, because my original ban of jab resolution called for the governor, attorney general to act, or the legislature. That was like, if the governor and the attorney general don't act, the legislature should do something. But these bills were coming out, to try to prohibit the mRNA injections, but none of them were saying it's a weapon. In other words, they're giving these bills that don't say it's a weapon are all bad, because they're giving cover to the criminals. The mRNA injections are already illegal. They violate your state or federal government's weapons of mass destruction or bioweapons laws. How do I know? I got an affidavit from the law professor under penalty of perjury that wrote the bioweapons law. That was the U.S. domestic implementation policy of the Biological Weapons Convention. So they're
Yeah.
already illegal.
Hmm.
So my bill is different. My bill is seeking to prohibit the injections because they're already illegal. And so what I have is on my website, and you go on josephsansone.com, there's an article up top that says, I'm going to war, will you join me? If you click on that article, I have all 50 state versions of this bill, and also a federal version. And then further down, I have links, because I actually have 55 country versions. I got all 48 European country versions, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, and so on. So, but it's been introduced in Minnesota. They probably might not get voted on until next year, because they have like that 2-year cycle. But it had 7 co-sponsors in the House, and then Representative Mecklen, told me when he dropped it in the Senate, they immediately got like 5 co-sponsors. So, and that's the most you're allowed in the.
Nice.
So I need it to
Wow.
go in other
Okay.
states. The idea here is maximum pressure. This needs to be introduced. The more people in unison that are saying these are bioweapons, the better. The people in the quote unquote health freedom movement that are not saying these are a bioweapon are the problem. I've been
So
fighting
let's you
against them for a few years now. They're the problem, because
yeah.
that's why our people are being killed right now.
So you just said that you wrote a version for every single state, for all the 50 states, and then also for some other countries like in Europe, etc. And amazing, and also a federal version.
Yep.
So I had a look. I actually went, since I live in New York, I had a look and looked at the New York version, which is probably almost identical to all the other state
I
versions,
just
except
changed. I
that
just changed out the
yeah,
state statutes.
exactly,
And listen,
exactly. So
this
let's
is a template. If I make, I did a lot. If I mix something up, you can fix the statute. It's not, you know what I mean?
yeah, but so I just want to show this briefly because it's really interesting. Let me see. I'm going to pull this
And while
up.
you're pulling it up, I want to point
Um,
one thing out too: is don't look at this about whether your state can pass it. This is a cumulative effect. If you get this introduced in New York State or California, that's like poking them in the eye, and that's good. Because the more attention you get to the fact that this is a weapon, it moves the needle in our direction, and that gives courage to other people to come forth and introduce it in their state. A lot of what's happening is
Right.
people are cowards and they're sitting back.
So,
Camellia, on that page, I also have like the downloadable version of Dr. Francis Boyle's affidavit saying it's a bioweapon, as
yeah,
as well as that paper that I just referenced that says it's a bioweapon, the peer-reviewed journal.
yeah,
And that's
exactly. Yeah, I
helpful
had a
because
look.
if you're going to meet with a legislator, you can have those documents with you to help kind of wake them up a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I had a look at the affidavit. I can show that in a moment too. So here's your bill. It's called New York Sansone mRNA Bioweapons Prohibition Act. And so that's the title of the bill. It says an act designating mRNA injections and products as biological weapons constituting a terroristic threat as defined by New York Penal Law, paragraph 490.20, etc., etc. And be it enacted by the legislature of the state of New York, etc.
Mhm.
So let's go to the statement of intent, which
And-
is so this is like kind of the heart what the legislature would do, right?
mhm.
It would designate the mRNA injections and products as biological weapons constituting a terroristic threat. Okay, to prohibit their possession, use, or distribution in the state of New York.
Right. So down here, I used our weapons of mass destruction law. Over there, I used that law.
Yes. And here you say in section 3, all mRNA injections and products shall be designated as biological weapons constituting a terroristic threat, as defined in New York. And in the other states, it would be according to their
Correct.
to their
Some of them have
penal laws.
bioweapons, other ones are weapons of mass destruction law, other ones it was the terrorism law. Now, what's
Exactly,
really
exactly.
significant though is what I do here is I create a criminal liability for for non-enforcement. So let's say you're the sheriff or the prosecutor. Let's say you're the prosecutor and you're presented with evidence and you don't pursue it, or the sheriff is presented with evidence, they don't pursue it. Um, they can literally be charged as if they're violating the law. Now, I get it. The prosecutor might not want to prosecute their brother-in-law, the sheriff. So what I did is I created a civil cause of action here that there's a civil liability that you can sue them as well. So, I think that's important because if they don't enforce the law, then you can sue them.
So let's say if New York, if the legislature of New York would pass this bill and the governor would sign it, not that this is going to happen, but let's just assume this would happen. How would that square with the PrEP Act, which gives this freedom of
It
liability
would
to
have
everyone
nothing
with
to.
anything?
So a lot of people don't understand the PrEP Act. It would have nothing to do with it. The PrEP Act only deals with civil. It's not criminal. So it creates a civil liability protection for them. It's not criminal. So right now, someone could prosecute Albert Boyle or whoever. Like there's no. It's only dealing with civil. It's not criminal. Camellia, if I were an attorney, which I'm not, I just pretend to be one in my case, but if I were an
Hmm.
attorney and you came into my office with some case and I thought it was a good case, I'd go to the other attorneys and we would all brainstorm and we would come up with a legal argument. And so I would challenge the PrEP Act's if you file the case involving the PrEP Act, I would challenge the constitutionality of it. Because it's totally unconstitutional. It's literally
It
trying
is
to, it's
unconstitutional, no
totally,
doubt about
on
it.
one
Yes.
issue alone, since 1803, Marbury versus Madison, everybody's heard of that. We've got what's called judicial review. It's literally trying to say there's no judicial review. It's so right on
That's
that
right.
right there, it's unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it should be challenged in multiple ways. Now, here's another way to get around it too. If you're doing a case like mine, my case is a civil case. The reason the PrEP Act won't apply is because I'm not actually suing for money. I'm just trying to get an injunction to stop the shots.
Hmm.
There's no.
Hmm.
I'm not talking anything about civil liability. I'm now, and again, I'm going after my defendants or the governor, the state of Florida, basically. So I'm not even going after the pharmaceutical companies in it. But so that's a little different right there. My case is, I realize it's a long shot, but at the same time, I've thrown so much at them. The court could do something if they want to here, and I do think I should win on a procedural issue. But don't let the PrEP Act stop you. Come up with, create, or find a legal argument. I think a lot of this is designed and put out there to make people feel helpless and fall into learned helplessness. Because I'm having an impact and I'm somebody with no resources.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, a lot of people have tried to sue, being damaged, being hurt, like you, by the COVID shots. Usually, not through shedding, but
Mhm.
there might also be law cases because of shedding. That's possible.
You're right,
And what
because of
they
the
hear,
censorship, there might be stuff we don't even know about that's been filed.
yeah. But over and over again in court, these cases are being thrown out one after the other with reference to the PrEP Act and say, there's nothing we can do because, the PrEP Act
And it's because in their briefs,
precludes
they're
it.
not arguing why the PrEP Act is unconstitutional.
Yeah, but even if they would. I don't think they would get anywhere.
But
But you
but
you go.
there need to be more cases, though, community. I think this is an important point. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's really
Mhm.
important. The court system need to get flooded with cases. Go think back into the 50s and 60s with all the civil rights cases. They didn't just say,
Yes.
they filed case after case after case after case. And it was,
Yeah.
and I think,
You're right. I agree. It would be good to have more cases, but there are various reasons why that's not the case. First of all, there are not many lawyers that will take this on. They will hear you and say, "Oh well, why waste your money? Why waste my time? Because we are not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to take you." It's actually difficult to find lawyers who will take your case, and then it's also very expensive to litigate, and a lot of people don't have the money to do it.
that is an argument for learning the court procedures and doing a pro se. I'm not an attorney. And Dr. Francis Boyle, I took a screenshot of this and I put it in my appeal because the lower court was saying it was frivolous. He said he sent me an email after he saw what I did after I filed my case, and he said this was a very fine piece of legal work. And
All right, yeah,
like so I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
right. It's interesting. So the court said your case is a frivolous case.
Yeah, when my
Did they?
motion
Did
for
they?
rehearing was denied, the court basically threatened me with, it said I could be sanctioned if I continue to file frivolous cases.
And how did they? Did they in any way explain why they think your case is a frivolous case?
No, and they just gave the decision, saying the reasons they dismissed it, and like I went through some of them with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so no, I think that I don't see how you can say it's a frivolous case. Um, they could again make the argument that there's no civil cause of action in the criminal, which they didn't do in the criminal statutes that I'm doing it under. But I'm arguing that these are also public health statutes. Our bioweapons law is like the equivalent of a public health law. It's designed to protect the public from harm. So that would be one thing they can do. But yeah, it's so I filed that. It's a screenshot in my appellate brief. I actually put his email in there, because I think it's kind of silly to say it's frivolous. But so what you need to do is you need to go to your state and learn. Go to your state's bar, like the Florida bar. If you go to the Florida bar here, they list the civil procedures for the circuit courts, and then they'll list the procedures for the appellate court and so on. So you need to learn the procedures a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
then find that every state has a digital system now. Like, so when I file my case, I don't have to drive up to Tallahassee. I'm going on my computer here and I'm filing my case through their system. So you need to learn that system and how to file the cases and learn a little bit about the procedures. You're not going to get it all right, but I mean, that's okay. I mean, you're going to learn as you go. Like, I know I've had attorneys telling me this at this point, because this is my second round going through appellate court. I probably know more about the appellate courts than most attorneys, because most attorneys don't even go in the appellate court. And,
Well, yeah, that's the expression I'm getting too.
yeah, and
the,
yeah,
the way you talk about your case, you're
and
turning
I,
into a
it's not,
lawyer
listen,
yourself.
I'm not, I'm not some genius here. I'm just doing it. That's why I'm saying people shouldn't. There are people that are smarter than me and people with a lot more resources than me that can be doing what I'm doing, and they should be doing it, or come up with a different angle. So asymmetrical
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
warfare requires asymmetrical resistance. We need to be like, oh,
Matt, maybe
go ahead.
you have your Substack, Joe.
Yep.
Mind matters, and everything else, right? So
Yes.
maybe I don't know if you have done that already. You might have, but if you haven't, maybe you should write an article about how what to do, how to go and do all this legal stuff in order to make your case in whatever state you live in.
Yeah, I should do
without,
that. I've written stuff about the learned helpless, like some of the stuff we've been talking about, but I
yeah.
should try to give a step by step. I just got to be clear that I'm not giving legal advice because I'm not an attorney, but I
Just
probably
put that
should.
in there. You're not I'm
Yeah.
not an attorney, I'm not giving legal advice,
But
but
here's what I
this
do.
is what I
Yeah.
did. This is what I learned, and, because that would be super helpful because, I mean, I, for example, would have absolutely no idea, and I'm sure that's true
Here's where it
for,
costs money is the time.
everyone.
I lose a lot of money doing this because I'm researching
Yes.
case law and that kind of
Yes.
thing, and learning the procedures, filing it. So in that sense, it does cost me money. But the filings themselves, like it's $400 to file at the circuit court, and then it was like $300 to file at the appellate court. So this is my second
Mhm.
case doing that. So it's not like I'm spending hundreds of thousands of dollars paying attorneys here. I'm doing it. So. And I know, like some of the procedural things I've had attorneys telling me was pretty good what I tried doing, but it's not, again, it's not, I don't think that I'm doing anything that's extraordinary other than actually doing it. And so find an angle and try to fight your case, and definitely try to get the bill introduced as well in your state. Because look, let's say we can get this introduced in like a dozen or 15 states. A lot of states don't come back in a session until January, but let's say we can get this introduced in a bunch of states. The writing's going to be on the wall. Someone somewhere is going to see it coming and want to get in front of it.
Oh,
And
yeah, yes, that's a very good point. So, try to get the bill introduced in other states than Minnesota. So how would you do that? Let's say I in New York probably, I wouldn't be very tempted to do that because New York is such a basket case. But if you live in a state
but
where you
don't do that. See, you're doing the wrong thing
okay.
there. So the reason is because, like, basically, if you can get a Democrat to do this, that's fine. But you're going to have to probably find a Republican to do it. But
Yes,
but sometimes if in the blue states where they got a Democratic governor, your Republican legislators got a little more courage because they really don't care what the governor thinks.
that's
They
true.
don't mind.
And we have some good representatives too.
Yes,
It's
right.
not
So
that
you
they're
need
all
to,
bad.
it might be in
Yeah,
upstate New York. You go find someone who's, might have the courage to do it and get it
right.
introduced because one, it's going to make a splash. Even with all the censorship, it's going to get out there and people's heads will spin. This gets
Yeah,
introduced in like a place like New Jersey, New York, or California. Their heads are going to spin. They're not going to know how to handle it.
yes,
And that's
yes.
good. That's good because what that's going to do is and so it's weird because most of the full-time legislature, I think there's like 9 or 10 states that are full-time, they're blue states. But most of the Republican states are part-time legislature. Most states are, but it's
Mhm.
like very few Republican states are full-time. But I think though, if you can get this introduced in enough of these blue states, what'll happen is it'll shame the red state Republicans to introducing it. And that's important because it might
Hmm,
pass in a state like Louisiana where they don't like the
that's a
establishment.
good point.
A-
Yes,
a-
and you
it's a
yeah,
cumulative
that's a very good
strategy, is
point.
what I'm saying. It's very like there's a ripple effect,
Right.
and I think people are like they get caught into this learned helplessness and this kind of defeatist attitude, and it's like no, it just needs to get introduced everywhere until we find some place where we can break through the dam.
Okay, so I would, for example, so in my case, I would look for a politician here in New York
Hmm.
who I would actually first have to do some research
Hmm.
on because I have no clue. So given up on the New York legislature. But so I would have to look around and zero in on some of the representatives in the state legislature of New York where I think that they might be worth talking to, and then just call up their staff and
Oh,
uh,
and if you can meet
ask.
with them, send them the info and try to meet with them.
Exactly. Tell them what it's about and ask if they could relay a message and then maybe talk to them on the phone and see if there's any interest. So that's all. It takes time. That's what it does. It takes time,
Yes, it
but
does. That's the there. It takes time, and
yeah.
here's the thing: you
Okay.
might have to educate them a little bit too. That's why the Boyle
Of
affidavit,
course.
that scientific paper that says it's a bioweapon, has 154 citations. It's a really good. It's pretty convincing,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so I think that,
Yeah. I looked at that paper.
and
That's pretty
to me,
impressive.
they talk a little bit about Dr. Vila, who I know here in Florida, about her. She gave an affidavit in my case. They talk a little bit about her preliminary research, and what she's showing is like 75% of the people that got shots have damaged immune systems, even if they're
Hmm.
asymptomatic. And
Hmm.
that's problematic moving forward because that's why you see more cancers develop and that kind of thing. And so denial is not going to protect anybody here. It's really important. You can't just pretend this didn't happen because the people are going to die in the future. So what we need to do is stop these shots. So one, we don't get shed on, but two, we stop it, admit what the problem is, and then we try to get these brilliant minds together to try to mitigate the damage. But if we just
Yeah,
let this go
absolutely.
on, we're allowing them to destroy our species.
And I think time is on our side, because even now it's the evidence for harm. All the studies that have been done already is absolutely overwhelming. There's no doubt about it. So, and more is coming out. And also, when you look, I saw a poll just the other day where it was almost 50% of Americans now
56, I
say
think it
that
was, saying that.
56
Yep.
saying that they think that these shots are causing, that the mRNA COVID
Serious
shots are
harm. Yeah.
causing
I
harm.
think that
Yeah,
was
serious harm.
Rasmussen. Was that
So,
Rasmussen, I think?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Rasmussen. So there is things have already progressed so far that that way more people now even willing to admit that the COVID shots are very are dangerous,
Here's the
and
thing
then
too,
even
though.
thinking about how was it possible that this even happened?
Right.
How was it possible that there were so many deaths, in the first 3 months,
Crazy.
and the vaccines weren't withdrawn?
Now, one thing I want to say too about like your whole New York situation there too, this is a perfect example. If you're getting legislation introduced there recognizing that these injections are weapons and already illegal, how likely are they going to be to try to push a mandate on you? If they've got to defend against it being a weapon, you're shifting the debate. See, if you fight
Yeah.
against mandates, there's an embedded Ericksonian hypnotic command that it's okay to inject people with bioweapons. But if you're
Hmm.
fighting and pushing the fact that these are bioweapons, you're not even going to be talking about mandates, because then they'll be talking about whether the shots are safe or not. Like, it's putting them on the defensive on their heels. Even in a
Hmm.
state like New York, it's hard for them to come back and push. If you even had a sizable minority in your state, in your legislature, saying that these are a weapon, they'd back up. They're not going to force you to do anything.
That's true. And it goes even further than that, because when you start thinking about it in these terms, that that you're being mandated to be injected with a bioweapon, with something really harmful, right? Then you all of a sudden start thinking about all the other vaccines as well, and all this discussion about how harmful are vaccines, not just the mRNA technology, but all the vaccines. And then when you realize, well, wait a minute, if there is all these thoughts and ideas and a lot of evidence and studies
Mhm.
already being there, showing that there is harm from just all sorts of other vaccines, like all these combination vaccines, for example, MMR, etc. um, then doesn't the same argument apply there? Once I mean, when you know that something is harmful and you inject someone with it, you inject a baby on its first day on Earth with something that is harmful, like the hepatitis vaccine,
Mhm.
then wouldn't that qualify the vaccine as a bioweapon as well? Because the
And
intent, the harm, it's harmful, and you inject it anyway.
right. Yeah, I think it could. The thing is, like, you have to be careful of the Lucy with the football syndrome. Remember the Peanuts? And Charlie Brown would go to kick the football, and
Yes.
Lucy would move it all the time. I noticed this, like, when you start doing some type of activism, people always come along and say, no, 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 you shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing this. And my response is like, well, there's division of labor. Let me do this, you do that. And because it's like everybody wants to shift you as soon as you make progress too. It's like a learned helplessness thing that people got. They don't know how to win. They're so used to losing. And it's like, here's the deal. The mRNA injections are clearly a weapon. If we can get that established in any jurisdiction anywhere and they get prohibited because of that, the whole thing's going to fall apart. And then it's going to ripple out to all vaccines.
For
It's
sure.
like the first pin to knock them all down. But I don't really go after the other vaccines because it dilutes my argument. But the reality is if we could get the state of Texas, Kentucky, somewhere, Louisiana, to like prohibit these because they're a bioweapon, eventually they're going to get prohibited in the whole country, or we're going to have revolution. And then
Mhm.
and then eventually the other vaccines are going to get prohibited, or certainly not mandated. So
It will, yes. Yes, yes. It will certainly throw a huge shadow over all I mean, I don't like mandates anyway. I don't think there
no,
should be
no,
any
of course
mandates,
not.
but
You don't have,
the
it's barbaric
um,
to think that you can, force a product into somebody's body. If you don't have private property, you don't have liberty, and your body is your private property.
right, right. But it will for those people who are still okay with these mandates, and there's probably still a significant number of people, who knows, it might, maybe, probably, hopefully not, no longer a majority. But even if you throw a shadow on a mandate, if you can somehow prove that actually a mandate was implemented in order to administer something that qualifies as a biological weapon, then all of a sudden all mandates become questionable, right?
Correct,
Because you
because
think, okay,
we
in
could
this
find out 10
case,
years from now, such and such
right.
vaccine was a weapon.
Right, exactly. So we say, "Oh my God, there is this precedent that the state forced me through a mandate to have something injected in my body that really harmed me and that might kill me and that qualifies as a bioweapon." So if that is the case, then why should I assume that any mandate is different? I mean, there's always will be the suspicion that the mandate is going to hurt me, and then you start seeing mandates as they should be seen, namely something that forces you. Why do you need to be forced? If it's good for you, you would do it voluntarily. There's no need to have a mandate.
And if you
So
get the vaccine and it works, you really shouldn't have to worry about anybody else whether they got the vaccine or not.
ex
There's
exactly,
absolutely
exactly.
no argument
That
for a mandate. There really
yeah,
isn't.
exactly. No,
And
of
yeah, so
course not.
that I think is yeah, I think eventually that's where it would go. But defense is not going to work. So introduce my bill for a lot of reasons because it's going to shift the debate. And if we get it popping up in enough places, it might actually get passed somewhere. And so don't worry about
Yes.
whether it's going to pass in your state or not. That's going to affect other states and the overall consciousness as this gets out. The reason we're not where we should be is because when I did that first bandage ab resolution, I got as much pushback from our quote unquote our side as I did the other side. And most of the people in the alternative media are still censoring what I've been doing and other people like me because they don't want to admit these are weapons because they're either afraid of losing access or being canceled. Or they're just paid to be there to control the narrative of different segments of the alternative media. But it's a
Mhm.
weapon. Your people you know and love are being murdered, so do something about it. Stand up like here's the deal. You're gonna die anyway, Camellia. The question is do you stand up like a man or woman and fight, or do you grovel on your knees like a coward? This
Mhm. Right.
overall thing is about depopulation, technocratic slavery, and transhumanism.
And
And
yeah, and
so, do you
control,
want me to shift to
controlling.
Netherlands case, by the way?
Yeah, well, before we do that, I would like to draw the attention back to Francis Boyle because he is a really important player. He's actually also an important player in the Dutch case, so that could be a nice transition because Francis Boyle is a very well known, internationally known person. He was a professor of international law, and he was an expert on bioweapons, who in 1985 helped to draft the U.S. biological. What is it called? Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act, I think,
Yep.
and this act then was passed in 1989. So he was instrumental in the passage of
And
this act, and he is a
he
real
lobbied for it too. He's the one that
he
lobbied
yeah.
for it, and it got past both houses of Congress unanimously.
Yes. So he is one of the world's foremost experts in well, he was
Yes.
world's foremost experts in biological weapons, and he is the one who wrote an affidavit for you. I can show it. I can show it quickly here.
Yep.
And that was, I think, in the summer or so of
Yeah, he wrote that
2024.
for my first case, the Mandamus, and then I used it in the second case, and he was fine with that.
Oh,
Um,
I see.
so
Okay.
I asked him to write that, and he wrote it, it's his affidavit, and then he includes with his affidavit the transcript of an interview that he did, where he's talking about both COVID and the quote unquote vaccine as being bioweapons, but and he gets into a few issues in that interview, but his affidavit's very clear that he's saying the mRNA nanoparticle injections are bioweapons in violation
Yeah,
of
and
state and federal law.
here's the signed statement. So I want to have a quick look at this
Sure.
because I mean that's pretty impressive that you got. How did you even get in touch with him?
Well, I'm on a board at National Arm, and he was an advisor to them. But actually, because I was, like I said, when I was in the hospital, I was actually on a conference call that he was on, and I asked him to endorse my bandage ab resolution, which he did, graciously in
Right.
writing. Because I didn't want anybody to know I was in the hospital at the time because they were working against it. But yeah, this is the affidavit. I'm blind as a
Yeah.
bat. That's why you see me leaning in like this.
Yeah. So here is what this is just you
That's
saying
me
that
affirming that that affidavit is authentic, and then that's a
exactly. And
copy of
here,
it.
yes, and here's the affidavit itself, and he says, pursuant to 28 USC 1746, I, Francis A. Boyle, declare under penalty of perjury that the statements contained herein are true and correct.
So,
All
with,
right. So
just so
then he
you
says,
know,
yep.
with that statement that he's citing there, that's why it doesn't have to be notarized. Pursuant to 28 USC
Oh,
70. That's
oh,
so
okay.
that's why it doesn't have to be notarized. He's citing that because
Okay.
I questioned him and he said, no, that's fine like that. So,
Okay. So it was sufficient that you say that you do your
no,
signature up here,
I
right?
was
For
doing
us.
this because I was doing this for the Netherlands case. And then I was just doing it for so people have it because this version here isn't the one that's stamped with the court thing. So I wanted to at least put something there saying, hey, this is authentic.
Okay.
This isn't the one that has
Okay.
the court stamp on it because that was at the end of the affidavit in the one case. And then, so it just,
And he goes ahead and establishes his credentials, who he is, professor of international law, etc., etc. I advised numerous international bodies in the areas of human rights, war crimes and genocide, nuclear policy and biowarfare. Then he um, talks about how he, in 1985, how he drafted the legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention that then became the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989, was approved unanimously by both houses of the US Congress. And then he says here, this is the crucial part, it is my expert opinion that COVID-19 nanoparticle injections or then, COVID-19 injections meet the criteria of biological weapons and weapons of mass destruction according to Biological Weapons 18 USC paragraph 175 and then some. Is this a Florida statute here, this
so
next
18,
one?
yeah. So the first one is 18 USC 175, Chapter 10, biological weapons. Second one is Florida Statute 790.166, which is our weapons of mass destruction law.
So that is Francis Boyle's affidavit. And he, by the way, he died very unexpectedly in January of
Yeah.
2025.
Why don't I address that a little bit? So he did die in, I think it was January 30th of this year. My understanding is he got sick, went to the hospital and died. I didn't hear anything nefarious about it. Um he now
Yeah, but also I heard that nobody knows the cause of his death, which is strange. That you don't know the cause of his death, or do
No, I
you?
don't. All I know is he was sick, went in the hospital and died, which could mean 101 things. Yeah, I mean, without evidence, I don't like. But here's the thing about that. So I was in communication, with them in the Netherlands for like over a year, and I mean, I wasn't heavily involved in their case. Right? I shared stuff from my case, that type of thing, and then they asked me to put him in touch with Dr. Francis Boyle to testify. So nobody knew that Dr. Boyle was going to testify, other than myself, Dr. Boyle, and the attorneys there. Like the court didn't even know yet, and that would have been a huge shock because it would have been hard for them.
I
It
see.
would have been hard for them to censor that he was testifying. So he agreed to testify, and then, about 3 weeks later, he died. But nobody knew he was going to testify. Now, you could say that the NSA monitors all our communications and that kind of thing, so it's always possible that it was nefarious. But as far as I know, I haven't heard anything like of that. That nobody said that was involved that knew him. But the case in the Netherlands is important. It's a little different than mine, but they're further along than I am in a certain way because I think they filed the case in like September of 24, and I think it was in October they tried to dismiss it, and they survived that. So the case has been moving forward. And in that case, after Dr. Boyle died, what they did is they got myself, Catherine Austin Fitz, Sasha Latipova, Catherine Watts, and Dr. Michael Yeadon, who was former VP at Pfizer, to be as potential witnesses in this case. And what happened is the court denied that, and also so they appealed that a couple weeks ago, to allow the witnesses, but also to allow media and uncredentialed reporters into the place and the public to be able to view, because it's such public importance. They don't want it behind closed doors, the proceedings. So that appeal is going on while the case is still going on, though. So that case is moving forward. That case is a civil case. Mine is civil, but I'm just trying to get an injunction. This is a civil case seeking indemnification for victims. I forget how many people are on the case, but some victims that were injured by the injections. the defendants are people like Albert Bourla from Pfizer, Bill Gates, and
Klaus Schwab,
Klaus Schwab, that's right, from the World Economic Forum. I think the Secretary of
Mark
NATO, like some very
Mark
well
Rutte. Yep.
big people,
Hmm.
and they're bringing it, and this is why this is really good, is because they're bringing it forward based on the fact that the injections were biological weapons and that genocide was committed. And so I think that's important because even though this is a civil case, if they won, that would mean a jurisdiction, a court is saying, yeah, these are weapons and the money was awarded. That would lead to the shots being pulled and probably prosecutions at some point. So I think, and this is why I say, come up with find a legal argument or create one and bring up a case. Um, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
it,
And there are also some interesting co-defendants, or what are they call major subjects in this civil lawsuit. And one of them is the Gates Foundation.
Mhm.
And the other one is Gavi, so the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. Both of them are mentioned as co-defendants. And also a defendant is the entire state of Holland, of the Netherlands. So the entire Dutch state is a defendant in this case.
And so
So that's
when you're
pretty, I
up
mean,
against such
I mean, it's amazing that they allowed this case, right? I mean, that alone
right,
is
that it
pretty
survived the
astounding.
initial
Yes,
dismissal
yes,
is amazing.
yes.
When you're up against such big opponents, the odds are obviously not in your favor, but I think it's important to push the envelope because someone else is going to come forward somewhere else and file something similar. And I think that's really important. It's the same thing with my bills. It's like a cumulative effect, a ripple effect. And I think it's really important to file these cases. And I think that,
Oh, absolutely.
it-
It's so crucial. It's a wonder. It's I mean I think this is one of the best cases ever that they are bringing
yeah.
here, and that has survived so far. Now, what's really interesting, and I want to ask you about this, is there were two lawyers on this case, Peter Stassen
Mhm.
and Arno van Kessel, and both of them are very renowned, very experienced lawyers in Holland, and have a great reputation, are very, very competent. So one of them, Arno van Kessel, was, I think it was in June this year. There was a raid at dawn by the Dutch, by some sort of a SWAT team. Apparently, they were armed with weapons. They came to his house and got him out of bed and arrested him, and I think also threatened his family. And he is now in prison since June, and he is in a high security prison in Holland. He has very little. Uh, he's not really allowed to communicate with anybody. Apparently, even with his own lawyers, nobody really seems to know who his lawyers are. And he was while in detention, since he got detained. His bar association has been stripped from him, so he can no longer practice even as a lawyer. He can no longer formally represent himself in court in his own
So
case.
the thing about now, Arno and Peter Stassen, there were co-counsels on it. Now I know that
Hmm.
Peter wrote all the briefs, but I mean they both worked on it. So I don't know how much it's going to impact this case or not. I don't know. The timing of it certainly seems suspect, but I mean I don't think anybody knows whether there's what he's being like. There might be something else he's being charged with. It's totally unrelated to this case, but nobody knows. You know what I mean? So
But yeah, the fact that we don't even know what he's
right,
being charged with. I mean, usually there's habeas corpus. You're being
sure, yeah.
told why you are being thrown into prison. He didn't get bail. And nobody knows what he. There are some sort of allegations. What was that? That he has connections to some criminal networks. But there's absolutely nothing concrete. Nothing. It's all just kind of very vague and rumors.
Yeah, so I don't know really much about why he was arrested, what their reason is, or it's certainly suspect. I know that the case is going to move forward. I mean, because like I said, Peter, I believe, wrote all the briefs. So I mean, they both worked on them, but Peter actually wrote them. So I don't think it's going to stop this case from moving forward. What's behind that arrest, I don't know. What did they plant something on the guy's computer or something? I don't know. But so I can't really speak too much to that other than it certainly looks suspect that he's getting arrested and nobody knows why he's arrested. So that's very questionable.
Well, it reminds me of the case of Rainer Füllmich.
Right.
Do you know the German lawyer?
Yeah,
Because
I know Reiner. We've been on, yeah,
oh, you know him?
y
Oh, okay,
not real
right.
well, but I
Because
know him, yeah. Um,
because he tried something similar. He also tried to bring a case, and he tried to have some sort of
well, in his case, we know more. They kidnapped, supposedly with financial stuff to do with his
kid.
organization, but it's like they kidnapped him basically out of Mexico, brought him to
Right.
Germany. So we know a little bit more about that. That's definitely a total sham that they're doing to Reiner. And it probably is here too. I just don't know what they're, what's behind it, other than like they don't like what he's doing. Um, so I think that the important thing is, like, not to be afraid. I think you just gotta do your thing and file your case, and because this case is moving forward. Peter seems fine. It doesn't look like they're doing anything to him. So I think it's important that people don't get intimidated by this kind of stuff. Because again, we don't know the details about why they actually arrested him. So I mean, uh, but I think that it's important to just continue to go after these people, because eventually, when the pendulum swings the other way, it needs to be where these people have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They could run
Yeah.
into the earth. There'll be nowhere to hide.
So I heard that in the Netherlands there is I guess a new regulation or rule or something that if the defense objects to witnesses, like the 7 witnesses that you were among them,
Right.
that were supposed to give testimony at the civil lawsuit in the Netherlands, that if the defense objects to any witness, then the witnesses cannot appear, which would make it impossible for any one of you to make any statements in that case.
I posted
Is that
Peter's
correct?
appeal to that. So he appealed
Yeah.
that. I think he felt pretty strong about the appeal on that specific issue. But remember, we're not
Okay.
talking appealing the whole case. The case is moving forward.
Yes,
But
just with
just
the
that issue to
witnesses, right?
witnesses, he appealed the issue to witnesses and allowing press and public to attend, because
I know, that's the other incredible thing,
that's
right?
really important,
They
because
didn't even allow the public to attend. They didn't allow non-credentialed media to
but
attend.
this is arguably like one of the most important cases that could ever get thrown up there in the Netherlands. And it's like, you're saying the public shouldn't be able to, see what's going on. Like, we don't have a right to watch a case that impacts us because we may have been poisoned.
Yeah, yeah, incredible. I mean, just the fact that they want to keep the public out, because of course the public can attend a court proceeding. That is
Right.
just the way it is here. You can walk into any court proceeding and just sit there and watch it if you want to. That's the same in the Netherlands. But in this particular case, they said, no, it's not allowed. Public cannot attend. Even in Rainer Füllmich's case, the public was allowed to attend.
Right. Which is wrong,
And
because if they do something that's ridiculous here, the world should see it.
yes, of course, they should see it. But so one of the defendants in this case is Albert Boyle. And let's end with this, because this is so, I find this so incredible and um, depressing, really, frankly. The Albert Boyle just concluded a deal with Trump or Pfizer. He is the CEO of Pfizer, so they just concluded a deal with Trump for $70 billion. Um, Tell me about this and what you make of it.
This is why I tell people to stop cheering for Trump or Kennedy. They support continued mRNA biowarfare against American citizens. I don't know about anybody else, but I kind of voted for Trump not to have dinner with Bill Gates and hang out with Albert Bourla. I kind of thought maybe he might be arresting some of these people, So it wasn't, it's kind of funny too. Bill Gates, in his argument, against on the case there, is that he has no influence over vaccine policy, and then like 2 days later, you're seeing him at the White House with President Trump talking about vaccine
Yes.
policy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's I think, I don't know. I'm very disappointed with pretty much everybody that's in positions of power, because none of them have done their job. Like, the myth of constitutional sheriffs here in the United States has just got blown out the window, because there are none. None of them have done their job here.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to agree. That was really really shocking to see to see them with RFK standing in the background, and he did not look happy. Um,
On the one sure, he looked like he was smoozing up, so
well, he was smiling in one. Yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
and so
He was.
he praised the yeah, I'm sorry, but I can't give cover for any of these people. Why are the activists, like, putting their neck in the line, and these people are just bowing down and cowering like little lackeys, you know?
Yeah.
So who's telling Trump what to do? That's the question.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting times. Just a few days. What was last week when Trump started talking about vaccines and how dangerous they are, and that they are putting them all into beautiful babies?
Very, very quickly, 'cause alright, let me finish with this then, because that's part of what they do, though. The Trump administration, Kennedy and Trump, they give mixed messaging on purpose because it gives their supporters that are struggling with the cognitive dissonance something to cling to, and then they ignore everything else. So they'll cling to that statement and ignore the fact that he's hanging out with Burla, doing this deal. And I think the mixed messaging is on purpose. It's just part of the manipulation of a lot of the people that voted for him. But more and more people are waking up. So I think they're eventually the con man gets caught.
Yes. Well, let's hope so. Thank you very much, Joe.
Camellia, you're the best. I said it. Everybody doesn't mean it's not true.